old man, who had been sitting quietly for most of the evening, stood up. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He looked as though he had seen something beyond human understanding.
The land has opened its mouth, he said, his voice shaking, and now it will swallow us all. If we do not act, we will be gone like the mansion, like the memories of the dead.
The villagers looked at each other, afraid to speak, but they knew the truth now. There was no escape, the wrath of the bone, no hiding from the hunger beneath the ground. And as the moon climbed higher, they felt it. The ground trembled just like he had before. The earth was calling, it was waking, and there was no one left to stop it. It was 2 weeks after Jide's disappearance that the first major tragedy struck. The village of Odim, which had once been peaceful, was now a place marked by fear. The field seems to bow low as if the land itself had begun to weep. The sky had taken on a grayish hue, heavy and thick like an impending storm that never quite arrived. People were disappearing, slowly at first, one by one. No one spoke of it aloud, but everyone knew. The old woman whispered in the dark corners of their huts. The children, once full of life, now huddled close to their mothers, eyes wide and fearful, the earth beneath them trembling like a child with fever. The rains never came the same way anymore. They fell in unpredictable bursts, a torrent that flooded the earth and soaked through the skin of the village. That evening, as the villagers gathered in the center of Odim, a low horn started from the ground. It was subtle at first, almost like a distant sound of wind in the trees. But then it grew louder, like the voice of a giant rising from beneath their feet. The ground itself was speaking, groaning as if something within was trying to claw its way to the surface. It was then that the old man, the one who had warned them before, finally broke the silence. His face was pale, drawn with lines of age and sorrow, but his eyes glared with a cold, hard knowledge. He spoke quietly, yet his words echoed across the square. The earth is angry. We woke it up. And now it wants us to pay. The villagers looked at one another in confusion. What did he mean again? How could they have awoken something beneath them? What was he talking about? But the old man didn't wait for their questions. He only continued. The bones beneath us, the bones of the land, are no longer at rest. The land is hungry, and it will take what it owns. The fear was palpable. It crawled through the air, sinking deep into the heart of the villagers. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. They were waiting for the end. It was coming. The very earth beneath them began to crack open, slowly at first, like a dry river splitting after a long drought. A deep rumble like thunder vibrated from below, and a great figure split the ground in two, right through the middle of the village. And then, as if the land had decided to reveal its deepest, darkest secret, something began to rise. A face made of dirt and blood, twisted and ancient. It crawled from the earth, imagined like nightmare from the underworld. The villagers screamed in horror, running in all directions. But it was too late. The face had no eyes, but it saw them all. It turned slowly towards them, and then a deep guttural voice erupted from its throat. Give us what we are owned, or you will be no more. The earth was speaking. It was no longer just the land beneath their feet. It was alive. It was angry. It was demanding, and it was coming for them. The face that had risen from the earth was not the only thing that emerged. Behind it, the ground shifted, more faces, more bodies, more figures that were not quiet. Human, not quiet death, not quiet death. It was as though the earth had opened its mouth and vomited forth everything it had swallowed over the centuries. Old bones, old souls, forgotten lives. Each face was twisted, broken, and incomplete, as though they had been torn apart by the very land they had been buried under. One by one, they emerged, crawling from the cracks in the earth, rising from the depths where the dead had been forgotten. Some were still wearing tattered clothes, others were mere skeletons, the bones restlessly rattling as they moved. And in the midst of them all, standing in the front as though leading them, was the figure of a man, or what had once been a man. It was Chief Nnadi, but it wasn't really him, not anymore. His eyes were wide open but empty, as if they had been the very core of the earth. His skin was pale and stretched tight, his face unrecognizable. He was a ghost now, but one that had been dragged from the grave. The villagers ran in all directions, scattering like ants under a foot, but it didn't matter. It was too late. The earth had risen, and with it, the forgotten dead had come for what was theirs. Chief Nnadi had not been a man of wealth or power. No, he had been a man with thoughts he could build on bones of earth without consequences. And now the earth had come to collect. The villagers tried to fight. They tried to run. But the earth was too strong, too alive, too hungry. As the dead walked among them, the villagers realized that they were not simply being punished, they were being erased. Each person that was touched by the figures from the earth crumbled like dust, as if they had never existed. Their names were forgotten, their faces were lost, their very souls were swept away like leaves in the wind. But in the midst of this chaos, Mama Nene, Jide's mother, stood alone. She had walked everything, felt it all, but somehow she had not been touched by the dead. Her son's spirit had not taken her yet. She stood before the twisted form of Chief Nnadi, who not towered over her like a shadow. She looked into the empty eyes of the man who had once walked with pride, who had built the mansion on the graves of the forgotten, and she said, her voice strong and steady, though her heart was heavy with grief, "You took from us, and now you will give it back." There was no anger in her voice. There was only truth. The ground trembling once more, the earth groaned as if the very soul of the land was bending under the weight of words. And then Chief Nnadi fell. He crumbled to dust, his body disintegrating as though it had never been more than a shadow. And the dead that followed him vanished back into the earth as if they had never existed. The land was silent. What just happened? The air was still, and all that remained was the hollow ground, the place where a mansion, where bones had been disturbed, and now there was only silence, a silence that would last forever. The village of Odun was no more. The village had taken everything it wanted, and what remained was a hollow echo, a silence that reigned louder than any scream. The once lively homes were reduced to crumbling stones and twisted branches, forgotten by the very earth that had lived on it. The people who once walked those streets, who spoke and laughed and cried, all gone by the hunger beneath them. But Mama Nene remained, though she stood amidst the ruins of her village, untouched by the dead. She felt something stir within her, ignoring deep within her chest, like an emptiness she could never feel. Her son, Jide, had been taken by the earth, his soul lost to its unquenchable thirst. The village people had all been erased, and yet she had been spared. But the question lingered, why? Why had she, of all people, survived the reckoning of the bones. She wandered through the ruins, the earth beneath her feet still trembling with the whispers of the past. Her heart, heavy with the weight of grief and loss, led her towards the one place she had not dared visit, the hallowed ground where the mansion had stood. But as she approached, the land began to haunt. It was no longer the low groan of a hungry earth, but a more distant sound, a voice that rose from the depths, familiar and strange all at once. "You have come," Mama Nene froze. The voice was soft, gentle, and it carried with a weight that pressed down on her. It was a voice she knew, a voice that echoed in her heart. It was Jide, her hands trembling as she stepped forward, unsure whether she should run or listen. She wasn't sure if she was dreaming or if the earth had truly come to speak to her. But she could not turn away. "Not now, Mama Nene." The voice called her, and this time it was not distant. "I'm here. I've always been here. But you must understand." And then, in the blink of an eye, the ground before her split open. It was as though the earth itself had torn a hole in time, revealing something that should not have been seen. There, in the darkness, stood a figure. It was Jide, but not the Jide she remembered. His body was pale, twisted. His eyes, once full of life, were now empty, like the hollow void of the earth itself. He reached out to her, but his face was filled with sorrow, regret, and something else, something far darker. "Mama," his voice was pain. "It wasn't the land that took me. It was my father." She felt the ground beneath her feet trembling once more. "Huh? Your father how?" Skipped a beat. Her own flesh, her blood, her son had spoken those words. "Your father? How?" she asked again. "He built that mansion on bones," Jide said, his voice full of anguish. "But he was not just building, he was feeding, he was sacrificing. He knew the earth would demand its due, but he thought he could control it." Mama Nene's breath caught in her throat. Chief Nadi had made a deal? A deal with the earth? A deal with demons? A deal to gain wealth, power, to control life and death? How? And now, her son was the one paying the price. "I was the last sacrifice," Jide's voice trembled, his form flickering like a fading shadow. "But I didn't know that what was buried beneath us was more than just bones. It was the very soul of the land. It was the soul of the people who had come before us." Mama Nene sank to his knees, her hands clutching at the soil, her heart breaking. Jide, her precious boy, had been taken because of a selfish, greedy pact made by the man who was supposed to protect them. "The earth, it never forgets," Jide whispered, "but neither will I forgive." Suddenly, the voice of the earth returned. The earth, it never forgets," Jide whispered, "but neither will it forgive." Suddenly, the voice of the earth returned. The deep guttural rumble. It was not angry this time. It was final. The price has been paid, but there is always more to take. The ground beneath her began to pulse, the dirt shifting in a slow, rhythmic beat. And then, something even more chilling happened. Jide's figure, his body began to break apart, disintegrating like ash, swelling into the wind. Before Mama Nene could cry out, the earth spoke again, his voice deep and final. It was not just his life, it was the future of all who walked here. She couldn't feel it. The weight of the land had lifted just a little. She knew that the earth, the bones, and its souls of the dead had found some peace. The cost of the mansion had ended. The price had been paid, and the village of Odim, though gone, would never be forgotten. The earth was still now. The winds had calmed, the trembling had ceased, and the earth, the heavy feeling in the air, had lifted. But Mama Nene knew that it was only for a time. The bones beneath her feet still whispered, and the memories of the dead still lingered. She left the hollow ground, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what had happened and what had been lost. But she was no longer afraid. She had faced the truth, and in doing so, had freed her son's spirit from the earth's hunger. She walked away slowly but steadily, her steps now firm and resolute. The land had taken much, but Mama Nene had survived. Mama Nene had survived. She had endured, and she would carry the story forward for as long as she lived. For she knew now that the land had its own way of keeping the past alive, but so too did the people have a way of remembering, even in silence, even in the face of forgotten grace. End of the story. Now, let's look at this. Mind-blowing, right? Because the sacrifice, the hunger of the earth, everything came full circle. So, what did you learn from this story? Now, let's look at it. Devastating truth about Chief Nnady's deal, Mama Nene's heartbreak role in all of it, and how the earth itself demanded its price. I hope this ending lived up to the high expectation you had actually wished. Would you like to explore no, this one is for me. So what are the lessons from this? Let's look at the lessons. In this village of Odim, a tale of grief. Okay, this one is